And welcome back to Restless. My name is Father Joseph Gill, priest of the Diocese of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and you have joined myself, Joe, and Lauren. And Joe, unfortunately, is cracking up because Lauren let out a whoop. Do that again?
Right before whoop whoop.
Yep, there we go. That Joe lost it. Because we're very excited, but also a little bit sad, because this is Joe's last episode with us.
For some time, at least.
He decided he's going to join the carnival.
Yeah.
And
By my true calling, which is, you can tell by my voice that I love entertaining people.
Small children.
I figured you were going to be the bearded lady or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I really can't grow much of a beard.
And you're not much of a lady.
Oh, right, yeah.
So,
Doesn't matter anymore these days.
Actually, ooh, ouch.
Badooch.
So tell us, Joe, where are you going in a week?
I am going to St. Charles Borromeo Seminary, which is in Pennsylvania.
Seminary.
Seminary.
Well, that's exciting. Study to be a priest.
Is that what I do there?
Okay.
I heard the food was good.
And it's free.
It's free.
Church.
Yeah.
Yeah. So having known you since you were 13 years old, I want to hear your vocation story. Like what? Because I've heard we had you on here about your conversion story, about how you encountered the Lord and started following Him. But the vocation story is probably a little bit different. And you've gone back and forth over the last couple of years as to whether or not to take this plunge. So, what's your story?
Yeah. I would really listen to the episode you're referencing, which
Conversion Stories Part 1 and 2.
Yeah.
In case you're
Part 1 particularly is where I talked about my conversion, which was precipitated largely by your interventions, I would say. Yeah, I think that, I said in that episode that one of the ways which the Lord called me to Himself most, sort of like specifically, was through the liturgy and through the Mass, right? As an altar server, eventually as an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion and whatnot. And so, yeah, I mean, altar serving programs are drivers of vocations, at least if they're done right. And proximity to priests and to the Eucharist and to all of that, I fell in love with the Mass. And I would say that I considered the priesthood throughout high school, throughout college, but I don't think I could have told you why at that age, although I felt really strongly about it for a lot of that time, but I really don't think I could have told you why. And there have been a lot of false starts with this, where I've decided to enter and then decide not to enter within a few days, weeks, months, whatever, not important. But part of what kind of pushed me over the edge was I started teaching. So I graduated from college in 2020, and I started teaching CCD back in my home parish. And I would be saying things to the kids like, well, you really have to listen for what God's will is in your life, and you have to surrender yourself to His will, and you have to obey Him, even if it's difficult. And you'll lose friends, maybe even family, but you gain so much more by obeying Him. And as I'm saying it now, I'm laughing because it's ridiculous, because I was so totally ignoring my own advice, right? If it finally clicked with me that I can't put off God's will in my life forever. And it was pretty obvious to me at that point that He was calling me to the priesthood. And I just felt such a profound sense of responsibility for these kids I was teaching. And I realized that that's what I wanted for the rest of my life, was to bring people closer to Jesus and to celebrate the Eucharist. And so I went home eventually, told my parents that I was not going to go to law school, as had previously been planned, but instead was going to enter seminary. And let's just say it didn't go great. And so
What was the reaction of your parents?
Well, they were pretty surprised because we hadn't discussed it in years.
But you had discussed it in the past.
We had discussed it. So this was the second of 3 attempts. I'm a good Trinitarian. The first attempt was when I was 18. I was a freshman in college, and I came home during second semester and told my parents I wanted to leave to enter seminary, and they said that they were very much against it at the time.
What was your degree?
Political science. And so they convinced me to wait a year, which turned into graduating, which was fine. And it was on my mind, but it wasn't, I don't think, forefront in my mind for a lot of that time. I was thinking about law school or becoming a professor or a journalist or whatever. So I started working for a year, and I came home and I said, I want to enter seminary. And at this point I was 22, and my parents were not happy again. My mom had come around a little bit at that point. I was older. And I think her mind was like, well, he's not 18 anymore. He's an adult, he can make his own decisions. But she still thought it was a too quick turnaround for my previous plans. It was very sudden, I guess. And it was very hard for my dad, especially. And so we agreed to wait a year, and I would think about it and discern more, and they would think about it and kind of come to terms with it. And my mom really did come around in that year. She really came around in a lot of ways. I still don't think it's her first choice for me, but she's seen how much it means to me. And that seems to be enough for her for now. And she's trying to be she's being very supportive. My dad is having a very difficult time with him still. So those who are listening, please feel free to pray for him, because he can certainly use it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was that on that, and I'm going. Woohoo! It's happening.
It's crazy.
The fruit of many people's prayers and much patience
Yes.
by many people,
Yes.
including our Lord. So,
And I shared with Joe earlier that I got a text from a dear friend who goes to Joe's parish, and he was saying
which kids I taught martial arts to for many years.
Yeah, he taught martial arts to her kids, and she was saying that when she heard this news, her eyes were filled with tears, and she was very moved because having known Joe since he was a wee little one.
And she heard the news because my pastor, whom I love more than anybody on earth, at the end of the 11 o'clock mass this past Sunday said, after he finished saying that Deacon Angela Fleur would be returning to seminary, I said, and Joe Prada, Joe, please stand up for us. Is going to be entering seminary. And I did not know he was going to do that. And so everybody in the audience was made acutely aware of the fact that I was going to seminary.
Well, my pastor did the same thing when I was in high school. And the worst part was I had just come from umpiring a baseball game, and I was absolutely filthy. My hair was disheveled.
Were you in the audience? Were you on the altar?
I was in the congregation.
Okay.
I was wearing this ratty Baltimore Orioles t-shirt.
That's so
and he's
funny.
like, "Oh, you're going to seminary. Please stand up." I'm like, "I'm so embarrassed to stand up right now."
I was at least wearing cassock and surplice, but
Oh, that's good. So you already look like a priest. I looked like a bum.
I was pretty obvious in seminary.
I don't think I had shaved in 3 days.
Our latest priest, folks.
Yeah. The newest acquisition.
Yeah. They're like, "Can we trade him for a player to be named later?"
That's funny.
So what attracts you about the priesthood? What would be something you dream about doing?
I think I just like the idea of only working on Sundays. So, I think that's the life I was made for.
Tell me how you get that job. I'm not feeling it.
We're recording this on a Tuesday, obviously, so it's not true. No, I mean, above all other things, the Mass. I mean, the idea of standing in the person of Christ and consecrating His body for the people is that's enough for me. I've not to sound like sentimental about it, but it's not been an easy journey. And I told my sister, when we were talking about it one day, I said, the reality is that I'm not going to be convinced I don't want this, because if you told me that I would have to go through all 7 years of seminary and I could celebrate and I'd be ordained a priest I could be ordained, and then I would celebrate Mass once and then die the next day, I would take it in a heartbeat. Just to hold Jesus in my hands after consecrating Him myself. I mean, come on.
Wow.
Come on. That's so beautiful. I would take it and I wouldn't think twice. So the Mass first and foremost, but also, the fact that a diocesan priest lives out 2 of the 3 evangelical councils really means that he's available to his people in a unique way, I think. And so,
So for our listeners, what are the 3 evangelical councils? Lauren, do you know?
No.
They are poverty, chastity, and obedience.
Okay.
So I won't have to take a vow of poverty, as you do not either, since you're a secular priest, and that's what I am hoping to be one day. But you do take a vow of obedience to the bishop and his successors, and of chastity,
right.
Which means that you are fully available to your people. You live your life at the church, through the church, by the church, for the church, which means that I can be a father to God's people more than I could ever be with a wife and kids. As beautiful a vocation as that is, and it is.
That is very beautiful. It's very beautiful. I mean, I remember I was hiking probably about 3 years ago with a little family, and it was an aunt and her niece and nephew, and the niece and nephew didn't really know their dad, so I was trying to kind of be a father there, and we get up to this peak, and the son turns to me, he's probably about 10 years old, and he's like, "I'm so glad that you're my surrogate dad." I was like, I didn't know you knew what the word surrogate meant.
Right.
But I was like, wow, it's one of those moments where you really do get to be that father.
Yeah.
So what do you think the challenges are going to be? If you can think of them 7 years in the future.
No, yeah, I can. I'm young. I'm 23 now. I'll be 30 when I'm ordained, if I'm ordained, God willing. It might be hard for people to take seriously the idea that some 30-year-old who only ever held 2 jobs and never had a wife and kids is going to give them counsel. I could see that being a problem. I don't know.
I was 29, never had a job.
Yeah.
Unless you count my landscaping summer.
No, but I mean, that's a serious thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, I think that you have to kind of be on at all times. Like, you can't, as a priest, you don't want to ever have a bad day. Because, the one time you snap at a parishioner, that might be the last time they go to church.
It's very true.
You hear how many, I hear so many stories from people saying, I used to go to church, but I had a bad experience with so-and-so priest and never again. It's like, well, maybe he had a bad day. Maybe his dog died. Like, you don't know. But you have to always be thinking, like, I am Jesus to these people, not just when I'm celebrating Mass or in the confessional, but at all times. And that's a responsibility. And, there's a real thing that, like, those who are entrusted with the care of souls have a high obligation, and I take that seriously. I mean, I take it seriously when I talk CCD, and I don't want to be the reason somebody turns away from the church or turns away from Christ or doesn't come to conversion. It's horrifying to me. So
yeah,
some real challenges, but
that's fair. That's fair. What about you, Lauren? Have you ever thought about the priesthood? No, I'm just kidding. Have you ever thought about religious life?
Growing up, no, not at all. I think I was always close to Christ, and I always had a strong faith. But Not at all. I've always imagined I would get married and have my own family. And then fast forward to being like, I'm maybe 28 years old, and I made this comment to Father Andy that nuns are scary. And he looked at me like, what is wrong with you? I had no personal relationships with any sisters at all. So that was just a foreign thing. Like, who does that? You know? And then he was like, okay, I need to introduce you to some, clearly. And so he did. And I can see how it's such a beautiful life. And I'm really inspired from the sisters that I know. Their relationship with Christ and Mary is so strong. Like, you can see they're living it, you know? And I pray, I offer things up, I do penances, but I am not at their level. I can see it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you still kind of have doubt. Like, is my prayer working? Is this penance doing anything? Why bother doing this? Oh, I could watch another episodes of whatever show versus do my 30 minutes of prayer time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can fall off, but getting to know sisters that I have, you just see it's just every part of who they are. It's every day. It's like every hour of every day. It's such a strong devotion, and it's such a beautiful life.
Well, let me ask you, Joe, then, do you feel like...
To be a nun? No.
Do you feel the like, oh, I'm not holy enough to be a priest? Or are you like, yeah, I'm holy enough? No, that's kind of a catch-22.
No, I wouldn't phrase it in that. I'm not, no one deserves the priesthood. It's a gift. And that's why the sacraments work irrespective of the holiness of a priest, right?
Right.
I have real flaws that will have to be ironed out in formation and thereafter, right, for the rest of my life. Some of which will make ministry difficult and which will cause problems for me because that's how humans are.
Sure.
But Jesus doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. So if he's calling me to this, he will make it work for me and for the people whom I serve.
Amen.
I've known plenty of priests, and that's the thing. It's like, I know the priests have flaws, you know what I mean? Because I've seen them, and you learn what you can, but ultimately I'm not perfect, and that's fine.
Yeah.
God doesn't require me to be perfect.
Yeah. And I think, that's honestly been one very, very positive side of the, the scandals and everything that happened in the last 20 years is the fact that people are realizing that priests are people too. They're not, you can't put them as high of a pedestal as perhaps they used to.
And you can't expect them to always be working, quote unquote. Like, you need to be willing to be their friend and let them let their hair down. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, that is important. That's very important. So speaking of that formation that you mentioned, what, just for the information of our listeners who are probably wondering, how in the world does one become a priest? What is the process? And what is the process?
Yeah,
because nowadays it keeps changing.
Yeah, well, it's a little more
actually getting a little longer. That's why
it's a touchy subject. It's a little more complicated than one of those like $95 online forms you get to do weddings.
Oh yeah, you can get ordained online.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than one of those. So for me, it'll be 7 years in total, God willing. It's not. There's no problems along the way. The plan will be 7 years. First year is what's called probedeutic year or spirituality year, which is mostly focused on personal and spiritual growth and development, really into sort of intensive human formation, less so on class. There are classes, you go through the Bible and the Catechism and spirituality and whatnot, but it's really meant to be focusing on growth. So very regimented, prayer, everything scheduled, a lot of retreats, 30-day silent retreat at the end, poverty immersion for several weeks, work in the community to some extent. Technology fast Monday through Friday, commerce fast Monday through Friday. That's the first year. That'll be at St. Charles at a separate house, and then the next 2 years will be pre-theology. It's called minor seminary. So that'll be 2 years because I already have a college degree. If I had gone out of high school, it would be 4 years of college seminary. So that'll be just some intensive philosophy coursework mostly, and always continuing on human formation. And then after that, I believe after that 4 years of theology. What's unclear at the moment is that at the moment the way it works is you're ordained a deacon for your final year in seminary and a transitional deacon. And what looks like is going to happen is there'll actually be a period during which the transitional deacon is actually immersed in the parish, not just for a summer. So what I've heard is 6 months into your final year of major seminary, which is theology, you'll be ordained a deacon and you'll be in a parish full time for the last half of it. I don't know if that's what's going to happen. this is all kind of evolving at the moment because the USCCB is changing their program for priestly formation, and the Vatican's involved, and so we're the better part of a decade away from that. So I'm not worrying about it too much. But so that's what it looks like in broad strokes.
That's
for
pretty
me.
Intensive. 7 years.
Yeah,
That's longer than becoming a doctor. Certainly. I mean, if you went to law school, it's what, 3 years?
yeah,
And
yeah. By the time I'm ordained, God willing, I'll be the only person qualified to be in a young adult program.
Joe's making fun of how old I am.
That's right.
Well, that's good. When you're ordained, you can
Moved
take
on.
over Restless, and
Perfect.
I will go retire to the priest retirement home.
Nice.
So
At the ripe old age of 44.
44, 45, I don't
Perfect.
even know. I hope I'm still alive at
Me
that
too.
moment.
Yeah, me too.
But and I think what's important is that it's a long process because it's not just a job.
Right.
As you mentioned, it's who you become, and that's
Yeah.
and as you mentioned, Lauren, and nuns go through that same kind of formation process where it has to become literally like every cell of your being to become like Christ, and that's hard.
Yeah, on my drive in, I was listening to the bishop's podcast on which he interviewed Father Colin Lomnitzer, who was just ordained for the diocese, and he was saying that in order for the priest to stand in persona Christi, in the person of Christ, he really needs to conform himself to Christ, and that's what formation's about.
Yeah,
And that's about right.
yeah.
I was just talking to Father Lomnitzer last night, actually,
Oh.
because he was at St. John's for the Feast of the Assumption. And to me, there's something so moving about seeing a young priest, right, just up on the altar. And it's kind of like, oh, he's one of us. But wow,
Yeah.
he's made all these sacrifices and he's conformed himself, as you're saying. And I told him that after. And I don't even really know him. We met a year ago.
Yeah.
Also at St. John's, and we chatted, and then we've chatted once or twice since. But I don't know, it's just very special, and I'm excited for you, Joe.
Thank you.
And I feel privileged to know you now
Oh.
and help pray for you along your journey, and
I appreciate it.
So let's ask about those sacrifices, because I think that's a big reason that a lot of men choose not to go to the priesthood or women choose not to go to the convent, is because of the giving up of the spouse, celibacy. What do you guys think about that? Is it time to move on from celibacy? Is it a value? Is it hard? Is it possible? Is it healthy?
I think it makes no sense, right, to your everyday person until you really transform your life, like we've been talking, right? Because once you are centered around Christ, I think a lot of things just fall away. And we know just from you, Father Joseph, you are just the busiest priest, I believe, in our diocese. The amount of things that you do in running your parish and working with youth and young adults, and you're just endless. So I know the Protestants do it. They have a family and they still have their congregation.
Well, not just
but
Protestants, the Eastern Catholic priests
that's
too.
true.
Yeah.
The Eastern Church does too.
But you know what? I love the Eastern Catholic churches. I think they're really fascinating thing. I'm just saying that. But there's something to be said about the reality that chastity is an evangelical counsel, which means that it's ordered toward the evangelization of the world. The married priest cannot be as available to his parish, I don't believe, as the unmarried priest
I
can
agree
be.
with that.
And so that's what it is, right? You're marrying the church that you may be available to the church and to her people.
Yeah.
And it's just a beautiful witness. I believe this is what helped convert Christians. I don't know when, right? But it's like priests would come in and they'd be like, wait a minute, you're not trying to get with our women and
Right.
steal from us. And it's like, no, we're here to preach the gospel and we're celibate and we don't want anything from you.
Right.
Whatever you can give us, great, because we need to eat and live. But
Yeah.
it was all about Christ.
So it's not time to move past celibacy.
No.
Not at all.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And the married priests that I've spoken with all agree.
Yeah.
They're like, we feel so torn.
Yeah.
Do you mean they were married and then they became priests in the Catholic Church and that's how they're married?
Yeah, some Protestant ministers who were married and converted were given
Episcopal priests or Lutheran priests. and
Episcopal,
whatnot, yeah.
Lutherans,
Or the Eastern Catholic priests.
or Eastern Catholic priests. And they all acknowledge that it's a great gift. I actually was in seminary with a couple of them, and it was great. It was great meeting their wife and their kids. And we have a couple here in our diocese here in Bridgeport, and they're wonderful men. Don't get me wrong, but it was very it's funny because one of them was at St. Mary's in Norwalk, and he would often, while I was a chaplain at Trinity High School, because I kind of had an assignment but kind of didn't, because I was Trinity Monday through Friday, and weekends I was at St. Mary's, but they didn't always need me. So he's St. Mary's in Stamford, so he'd call me up and be like, "Can you house sit the rectory this weekend?" And I was like, "Why?" Because I got to be with my wife because he had a separate house for his wife and his kids.
Oh.
And so he'd be in the rectory 4 days and then, at home for 3 days and back and forth. And it's almost like being a divorced parent or divorced
Right.
kid, It's like
Huge sacrifice for the family.
huge sacrifice
Yeah.
for the family. And that's why even if a man nowadays wants to become a permanent deacon in the diocese and they're married, you have to get the wife's permission too, not just the man's.
Yeah. Some dioceses, I don't know about ours, but they actually make the wife go with the husband, or at least encourage her to go with the husband to the classes, because it's like you should see what you're getting yourself into, and you should know about it too, because you're going to be part of the ministry ultimately.
Yeah. So I think they have to go to some retreats with the man.
It's cool.
Which is very cool. It's a whole family journey, but as a priest, it is a great gift to have that freedom of heart.
Yeah.
And even more than, I think for me, even more than serving the church is being available to Christ.
Yeah.
Because I'm very blessed to pray for 3 hours a day. And if I was married, I wouldn't have the opportunity to do that.
What does your prayer time look like?
Usually I'll do a holy hour before Mass. So Mass is at 9 a.m. at my parish. So probably about 7:30 to 8:30. And then the full liturgy hours. And then I do a full 20-decade rosary every day.
Really?
Yeah. Just a lot of times I have a lot of drive time. You fit that in on the drive from Monroe to Stanford.
You're stirring up controversy. Starting the rosary is 20 decades, not 15.
Oh,
we're gonna get emails.
I just recently.
But they'll be
read-
in Latin, so we'll be able to read them.
Do you know
so it's fine.
Do you know who came up with that? It was not John Paul II.
What, Luminous Mysteries?
Yeah.
Oh, who was it?
It was St. Louis de Montfort.
What is he?
He wrote that in The Secret of the Rosary. Yeah, I know. Only the greatest man ever
Yeah.
to be devoted to Our Lady. He wrote that in The Secret of the Rosary. He said it's very legitimate to meditate on other mysteries, including things like the Transfiguration and the Wedding Feast of Cana. And so when all those tradies are like, it's John Paul II. No, it wasn't John Paul II.
Somebody poked Father Joe.
Only because recently I was backpacking with some families, and there's one particularly traditional Latin Mass family, and it was Thursday, and we were praying the Rosary, and I'm like, all right, first luminous mystery, and I saw the dad and the son start whispering to each other, and I'm like, you need to pray it too, because it's a really good, beautiful set of mysteries.
They're the
is.
mysteries for our time.
Yeah, I love the luminous mysteries.
Yeah.
It's because John Paul II encouraged us to make up our own. I also made up some other mysteries. I have no, they're legit. I have 5 mysteries on the parables of Jesus, 5 mysteries on the miracles of Jesus. I mean, come on, raising of Lazarus. There's so much to meditate on the raising of Lazarus. I don't
you're
pray
not
those.
down
I don't
for that?
pray those, but
I'm sure it's fine.
Joe's like, look.
I'm sure it's fine.
Somebody had to make up the joyful and glorious mysteries. They weren't just like dropped off by Our Lady to St. Dominic. Be like, here we go. Here's 15. That's the thing people forget about tradition, is that tradition originally was actually come up with by a human being. Mm-hmm. In fact, did you know that the organ was very controversial when it first came into the church?
Is that because it was not singing?
Right.
Yeah.
Because it was
Do you
not
know-
singing.
Do you know why it's preferred?
Yeah.
Because it emulates.
Because it emulates singing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
air going through pipes. Yeah. But for centuries, it was controversial. So like when the guitar entered the liturgy, now I'm not a fan of guitar music, but in the liturgy, but
Anymore.
I've played my fair share
Yes,
at
you have.
Steubenville. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Anyway, so we're off topic now.
we're way off topic.
That's all right.
So let me ask both of you the question: what are some qualities that make for a good priest? This is both helpful to me and Joe. So,
I think I have an easy, obvious one of humility. I mean, that's great for all of us. Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I've experienced this, but I could see it happening where a priest thinks it's all about him and the message he wants to relay to his people, and it's not, right? It's always about Christ and what's best, and sometimes it can be hard to humble ourselves,
Yeah.
or make a sacrifice you don't want to make. But if you're focused on Christ, that becomes easier.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really important that a priest look good in black.
Everyone looks good in
And I have really
black.
dark hair.
So why do priests wear black?
Because they're dead
Yes.
to themselves.
Yes.
Dead to the world. You know?
You're right. Dead to the world.
No, but in a serious way, I think that
Cheaper than colors. I don't know.
Yeah. Plus, it hides like stains really easily.
Hide
and,
stains. Yeah. Pasta stains.
Yeah, it makes picking out your wardrobe so easy. The morning,
Absolutely.
I assume. Although there's more variety than people I think realize.
I've
Clerical, not for you, but for other priests maybe.
Well, I'm amazed how many different shades of black there are. I think
'Cause things don't
I think I'm
match.
like a grayish right now. I don't know.
Might just be worn though.
It's very warm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a good priest needs to be flexible such that he doesn't make the perfect the enemy of the good. And and needs to be open to correction. Because I don't know this, but I would assume that after going through 7 years of seminary, or 8 years, or however many years they make up by the time I'm done, there can be a temptation to think like, I know this stuff. And like, I'm coming out of seminary, which there's beautiful liturgies, everybody's super pious, and now I just need to impose that on the world. And like, that's not what you're here for. Like, I just think you have to always remember that your mission is to save souls. And with that, I would say my third thing, which is there has to be an ambition and an eagerness, a zeal. What's the word I'm looking for? A sense of urgency about saving souls. I see a lot where we act as if like we're guaranteed the next 10 years of ministry with somebody. It's like, no, you're not. You don't know how much time you have to impact a specific life, or how long you'll have a program. Like there has to be an urgency about everything you do saving souls. That's what you're here for. You know, like they say that he who saves a priest saves 1,000 souls. But that doesn't just happen magically. Like the fact of your priesthood doesn't save 1,000 souls. You need to actually work for those souls. You're a labor in the Lord's vineyard, right? And I want to hear those words when I die, right? Well done, my good and faithful servant. Come share in your master's joy. That's what I want to hear, right?
At the same time, the one thing I've learned over 9.5 years of priesthood is that we don't save souls. It's Christ who saves them.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, we definitely need to be instruments. We need to listen to the movings of the Holy Spirit. But I tell you that it's frustrating to me, you know, as a priest to preach a homily and get no response, or to go teach a confirmation class and have all the kids abandon the faith, you know, and you're kind of like, is my ministry doing anything?
All but one.
All but Joe.
All but one.
So.
And I would imagine there could be a tough balance of, I guess, that care in not wanting to offend people, but also having to speak the truth, right? But I think we all actually experience that.
Do you?
Well, I mean, I love to chat with people about the faith or God, so I'm like, bring it on anytime I can. But it's tough, and it's easy to offend people, but the reason is good, right? And it's just clear to me too, in whatever you're doing in like a spiritual life or a life of faith, like you have to remain true to like the true convictions, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't, things start to fall apart,
Yeah.
and they are going to end, and maybe they should end. You know, like
The truth is an act of love, and you can't
well
forget
said.
that. Thanks.
Truth is an act of love. Yeah, that's true.
Can we hit on one other important thing?
Yeah, please.
Desolations.
What about them?
Enough
Well,
said.
Joe, I mean, has discerned this, right? I think a lot of people throw that word around, but Joe actually has discerned the priesthood.
Yeah.
So now it's likely to follow.
Discern seminary, yeah.
Okay.
Although I will say that I do
Is
believe
that
in
like
call to be
what,
a
a
priest.
technicality?
Well,
But-
Well, no, because the next 7 years, if he leaves, it's okay.
Oh.
Because God does call some
Yeah.
men to seminary.
I guess that's
For
true.
his-
A
For
man,
that's
a
it.
man who's not meant to be a priest leaving seminary is a success, not a failure.
Okay, well, that's a good clarification. But
But
anyway.
your point
the
is very
devil
much well taken, yeah.
is going to attack you
Oh, yes.
I'm a black belt,
because
bring it on.
that's what that's what he does. He wants to pull us away from following God's will.
Amen.
So I don't know. Any
That-
words of advice?
That is
Father
an awesome
Joe?
warning.
Yeah, what words of advice do you have for someone starting out?
About spiritual warfare
Yeah, and in general.
in general. In general. Stay close to Our Lady, definitely. You know, in seminary, there's a lot of men who love the externals of the church,
Yeah.
the cassocks and the bells and the smells, but are missing perhaps that personal relationship with Christ. So never get trapped in the externals
Nice,
to the detriment of the internals. It's the interior life that matters. And a priest must be a man who loves the cross. He must love to sacrifice, and he must sacrifice every day for his people. So never let a day go by without a serious sacrifice.
Nice.
That was so beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that's the same with even a married couple, right? I mean, it's just married couples kind of see the fruit of their sacrifice perhaps a lot more vividly. You know, when they're up at 3 a.m. cleaning up their kids' throw up, you know, that's sacrifice. You could see the one for whom you're sacrificing, and they may not be grateful at the time, but, you know, looking back, you're like, okay, that's the right thing to do. And the same way, if any good father sacrifices for his children.
Right. And living for each other versus living for ourselves.
Because it's very easy for priests to be just bachelors.
Yeah.
You know, you get paid well as a Dawson priest. You know, you don't take a vow of poverty, and some priests drive Maseratis, and well, maybe not a Maserati.
Never once seen a priest drive a Maserati.
I have seen a priest with was it a Mustang?
But a lot of your expenses are covered.
Yeah, a lot of our expenses
So-
are covered. I mean, and you can have good food all the time you want. And, you know, I'm very embarrassed. The priest before me, a couple of priests ago, bought a smart refrigerator.
Nice.
So you can hook up to your iPad or iPod or whatever, iPhone. I guess I know it's
which you
iPods,
don't have.
which I don't have.
Right.
But it can tell you what you have in your fridge. So if you're at the store and you're like, do I have milk? There's a camera in there to show you've got milk.
I see.
And I'm deeply embarrassed by it because that,
Well-
to me, goes against the Evangelical Counsel of Poverty, which I know priests don't take the vow, but we should still live it.
Simplicity.
it's a humiliation for you, right?
Yeah, that's true. I just have to make excuses anytime someone's like, "Ooh, nice fridge."
You're like,
I'm
I didn't buy it.
Yo, I'm so
I didn't
sorry.
pick it out.
I'm so sorry. All right, finally, in the last 30 seconds that we don't have because it's already past time, what can we do to encourage vocations to the priesthood and religious life, especially in today's world where it is kind of a hard sell? What can we do? 'Cause we certainly need more.
Priests need to model a happy and masculine priesthood that inspires young men to live that life. Parents need to be generous with their children and willing to give them to the church. And we need to prioritize real encounters with Christ on behalf of these kids and not an endless stream of YouTube videos and programs that don't actually facilitate conversions. Develop relationships with these kids. If you want to encourage vocations, develop relationships with kids in your parish, encourage them to grow in holiness. And if the Lord calls them to the priesthood, he will call and they will answer.
Beautiful.
I second that. Yeah, I think my small role is helping run youth group, and it became so clear to me in my first year of doing that we want to prioritize helping the kids develop a relationship with Christ. And that's all we're trying to do. It's like give them that opportunity, and Christ will do the rest.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for joining us in this episode of Restless. Thank you, Joe, for being part of our Restless team for so long. And we're going to miss you, but we're going to keep you in prayer as you go.
Thank you.
off to-
I'll be praying for all of you, and I'll be back. I'll crash in the summer when I'm home or something like that.
Please do. Please do. You're always welcome on Restless. You can find us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM, and you can also find us wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in next time.